happens when a civilization collapses, and what can be rebuilt from the ruins? Today we're diving into ancient Egypt, exploring a period of fragmentation and renewal that offers surprising lessons for our own world. Welcome to Blind History with Josh Berry. Over the next few weeks, we will be diving into the history of Egypt. Along for the ride, we are joined by our resident Egyptian expert, who will help us explore this wonderfully rich and fascinating history. Today, we will be discussing the first intermediate period and Middle Kingdom of Egypt. We'll be looking at how the ancient Egyptians grappled with political upheaval, social change, and the enduring power of culture. This isn't just ancient history. It's a story about resilience, adaptation, and the cyclical nature of power.
Thanks for having me. It's a fascinating period, often overshadowed by the pyramids of the Old Kingdom or the imperial ambitions of the New Kingdom, but it was really formative in shaping Egyptian identity.
So, let's set the stage. What exactly was the first intermediate period? And what triggered this apparent collapse?
Essentially, it was a period of political fragmentation and decentralization that followed the end of the Old Kingdom, around 2018 1 BCE. The long-held view is that it was a chaotic free-for-all after the collapse of the Sixth Dynasty. Power devolved from a strong central authority to regional leaders.
So, instead of a pharaoh in charge of everything, you had competing power centers.
Exactly. You had two main power blocks. In the north, rulers based in Herakleopolis claimed the title of king and controlled parts of Lower and Middle Egypt. And in the south, a line of Theban rulers gradually extended their influence. Then you also had local nomarchs, provincial governors, who exercised significant autonomy. It was a real mosaic of regional regimes.
A mosaic. I like that. So, how did this fragmentation affect ordinary Egyptians?
That's where things get interesting. The traditional narrative paints a picture of widespread chaos, and some Middle Kingdom texts certainly emphasize that. They talk about the land being in turmoil, the poor becoming rich, and the rich becoming poor, tombs being violated. It's a very dramatic picture.
Almost like propaganda from the Middle Kingdom, trying to make themselves look better by comparison.
Precisely. But archaeology gives us a more nuanced view. Life in many regions continued with a surprising degree of continuity. Villages still farmed, local temples still functioned. So it wasn't a total breakdown, but rather a shift in the way power was organized.
So, even amidst political upheaval, daily life went on. That's a key point, the idea of continuity, even during disruption.
It really highlights the resilience of local communities and institutions, and it also shows how later generations can selectively remember and interpret the past to serve their own agendas.
Okay, so how did Egypt move from this fragmented state to the Middle Kingdom? What was the catalyst for reunification?
Thebes, in the south, gradually rose to prominence. The Theban rulers presented themselves as champions of order and legitimate restoration. They combined military strength with religious prestige. And this is where the god Amun enters the picture.
Amun, as in the major deity?
Exactly. Amun was originally a local deity of Thebes, but as Theban power grew, so did Amun's status. The Theban leaders framed their political victories as the will of Amun, which reinforced loyalty to their rule. It was a potent combination, political ambition and religious devotion.
So, you're saying the rise of Amun was intertwined with the political ambitions of Thebes?
Absolutely. And through a series of campaigns and diplomatic maneuvers, the Theban line ultimately prevailed. Around the early 20th century BCE, a Theban king reunited Egypt under a single crown, marking the beginning of the Middle Kingdom.
And that brings us to the Middle Kingdom. What characterized this new era?
The Middle Kingdom is often seen as a classical phase of Egyptian civilization. The state reasserted central authority, but with a new vision of kingship. Kings portrayed themselves not only as powerful rulers but also as wise shepherds of their people, keenly aware of the need to prevent a return to chaos.
Wise shepherds. That's a very different image than the god kings of the Old Kingdom.
It is. Middle Kingdom pharaohs invested in both political and ideological consolidation. They re-established control over the provinces, reorganized administration, and promoted a strong royal ideology that emphasized the king's responsibility to maintain justice and provide for the needy.
So there was a shift in emphasis from absolute power to social responsibility.
Yes, and that's reflected in the literature of the time. Stories and teachings explore what happens when order collapses, when kings rule badly, or when social roles are inverted. It's almost like they're grappling with the lessons of the first intermediate period.
Earlier you mentioned texts from the Middle Kingdom that look back on the first intermediate period as a time of chaos. Can you tell me more about that?
Well, one of the key things to remember about the Middle Kingdom is that it was a period of reflection and self-awareness. There was a sense that their prosperity was fragile, dependent on good governance and moral conduct. As it says in the source texts, there was an introspective style of kingship that all influenced how subsequent dynasties imagined their own role.
That phrase, introspective style of kingship, really encapsulates the shift you're describing.
It does. And it wasn't just about ideology. The Middle Kingdom rulers also invested in practical measures to rebuild the state and the economy. They undertook extensive works on irrigation, canal building, and land reclamation, especially in the Fayum region.
The Fayum, that's an area southwest of modern Cairo, right?
Exactly. By improving agricultural infrastructure, they aim to secure reliable harvests, prevent famine, and generate surpluses to support the state, temples, and elite. The bureaucracy also grew in sophistication, with scribes playing a crucial role in recording land holdings, tax obligations, and deliveries of produce.
So, a more efficient and organized state apparatus.
Precisely. And trade routes were reactivated and expanded. Contacts with Nubia to the south became especially important for accessing gold, ivory, and other resources.
Let's zoom out for a second. We've talked about the political and economic changes of the Middle Kingdom. How did these changes affect Egyptian society and daily life?
For most Egyptians, the Middle Kingdom brought a measure of renewed stability. Farmers worked the fields, and village life revolved around the agricultural cycle. Social stratification remained pronounced, but there was a growing sense that aspects of royal ideology were now relevant to a wider segment of society.
How so?
Well, tombs of non-royal individuals became more elaborate, with more extensive inscriptions. Texts discussed the judgment of the dead, where a person's deeds and character mattered. This suggests a broader expectation that ordinary people, not just kings, could aspire to a meaningful afterlife if they lived ethically.
So, the idea of an afterlife wasn't just for the elite anymore.
Exactly. This democratization of the afterlife is a key development, and it's also reflected in religious practices. People addressed prayers and letters to gods and deceased relatives, asking for help with everyday problems. This more personal piety existed alongside the formal temple cults.
It sounds like a more intimate and direct relationship with the divine.
Yes, people were finding new ways to connect with the spiritual realm, and this also ties into the art and literature of the Middle Kingdom. Art is often praised for its balance and refinement. Sculptures of kings and officials exhibit a controlled realism, sometimes even a hint of age or wariness.
You're saying there was a shift away from the idealized portrayals of the Old Kingdom.
Yes, faces may show a certain seriousness or introspection, rather than the serene idealization more common in the Old Kingdom. This subtle change may reflect a new conception of kingship and elite identity, one that acknowledged the burdens of rule and the fragility of order.
That's fascinating. It's like the art is reflecting the lessons learned from the first intermediate period.
Absolutely. And literature reached a new level of complexity and self-awareness. Texts tackled themes of good governance, social inequality, and the unpredictability of fate. They give a voice to elite anxieties and aspirations, providing insight into how Middle Kingdom Egyptians thought about their own history.
So, to reiterate, We're seeing this theme of reflection and learning from the past across various aspects of Middle Kingdom society.
Precisely. But the Middle Kingdom wasn't a perfect utopia. As it progressed, especially into the 13th dynasty, signs of growing complexity and strain emerged. The royal line became more crowded and perhaps less stable, with many kings ruling for relatively short periods.
So, the seeds of instability were already being sown.
Yes. Provincial elites and military officials again gained influence, and some regions may have begun to act more autonomously, and foreigners, particularly from Western Asia, settled in the Eastern Delta in increasing numbers.
These Asiatics, as they were called in Egyptian texts.
Exactly. They participated in local economies, serving as laborers, traders, or even mercenaries. Over time, these demographic and political shifts would contribute to another phase of fragmentation, often labeled the Second Intermediate Period.
So, history repeating itself?
In a way, yes. Foreign-based dynasties would share or contest power with native Egyptian rulers. But even as the Middle Kingdom order weakened, its administrative structures, religious ideas, and artistic norms remained deeply embedded and would continue to shape Egyptian life.
So, the legacy of the Middle Kingdom endured, even through another period of upheaval.
Absolutely. The First Intermediate Period and Middle Kingdom together demonstrate Egypt's capacity for collapse and renewal. The breakdown of Old Kingdom centralization didn't erase Egyptian identity or institutions. Instead, it forced elites to rethink how power should be organized and justified.
That's a really powerful takeaway. It's not just about the rise and fall of civilizations, but about the enduring power of culture and identity.
And it's a reminder that even in times of chaos and fragmentation, seeds of renewal can be sown. The Middle Kingdom's rulers presented themselves as restorers of order who would learn from past failures, and their era left a deep impression on later generations.
So, what's the big lesson here? What should our listeners take away from this deep dive into ancient Egypt?
I think the most important insight is that collapse isn't necessarily the end. It can be a catalyst for change, a time for reflection and innovation. The Egyptians show us that even when things fall apart, it's possible to rebuild, to learn from the past, and to create a new vision for the future.
And that's incredibly relevant for our own world today. We're facing so many challenges: political polarization, climate change, economic inequality. It's easy to feel overwhelmed. But the story of the First Intermediate Period and Middle Kingdom reminds us that even in the face of these challenges, we have the capacity to adapt, to innovate, and to create a more just and sustainable future.
Exactly. The Middle Kingdom is a story about resilience and the enduring human capacity for reinvention.
So, we will wrap it up here for today, but stay tuned for more History of Egypt. The full audio article will be released this upcoming Sunday for a thorough exploration of this fascinating history. Next, we will be exploring Second Intermediate Period in New Kingdom circa 1650 through 1069 BCE. Join us next time on Blind History with Josh Berry. And I will leave you with this as we reflect on this era of collapse and renewal in ancient Egypt. Let's consider what lessons can we draw from their experience as we navigate our own era of rapid change and uncertainty. How can we ensure that our own Middle Kingdom is one that truly benefits all?